The underwater environment. In this module, you will learn more about some important characteristics of different underwater environments. Examine waves, tides, and currents. Begin to learn about different types of underwater fauna and the ways you can protect it. Look at the procedures you should follow when diving from a boat, and begin to learn the basic steps for navigating underwater. The underwater world. On this course you are learning the things you need to know so that you can explore the fantastic world hidden beneath the surface of the water. Diving can take place in diverse conditions and in various locations, each one different from another. Every dive you make will differ from the previous ones because of the location, the marine life you observe, or the conditions at the time. These varieties of environments have certain common factors that divers must examine before entering the water. One of these factors, which you already know about, is the water temperature. This can vary from over 30 degrees centigrade, 85 degrees Fahrenheit in warm tropical waters, to -2 degrees centigrade, 28 degrees Fahrenheit in the cold polar seas. Temperature does not only vary with latitude, but also with depth. In the sea, as you dive deeper, the water generally gets colder. The change in temperature can occur gradually, or it may change abruptly. This sudden change in temperature is known as a thermocline. This occurs because the layer of warm water does not mix with the colder one, and a very thin transition layer is created which separates the two. Not only can you feel the sudden change in temperature, but you can also observe a shimmering optical effect. Beneath the thermocline, the temperature may continue to change gradually. In such a case, it is important to know the temperature of the water and the depth of the thermocline, so that you can choose the most appropriate suit for the dive. Another important factor that divers must take into consideration is the visibility. This can vary from over 50 meters, 165 feet, to just a few centimeters, inches. If you want to dive in conditions where the horizontal visibility is very poor, it is advisable to attend a PSS Limited Visibility Diving Speciality course. Wave movement. Waves in the sea that break along the shore are familiar sights to all of us. But what are waves? How are they formed? And how do they influence our dives? Contrary to appearances, a wave is not a mass of water that moves on the surface. In reality, a wave is only a transfer of energy. You can see a practical example of this by shaking a length of rope and observing it as it rises and falls. You get the impression that the rope is moving, but in actual fact, each part is only making one vertical oscillation and doesn't actually move horizontally. A similar situation occurs in waves at sea. But how do waves originate? It is the wind blowing on the surface that causes waves to form. The wind excites the water particles on the surface to make a circular movement. If the wind continues blowing, the circular oscillation gradually increases, transmitting the energy to the particles nearby and those below. The longer the stretch of sea over which the wind blows, known as the fetch, the higher the waves become, meaning that there is a greater distance between the crest, the highest part of the wave, and the trough, the lowest part of the wave. As well as the height of the wave, another parameter used to describe waves is the length, meaning the distance from one crest to the next. An important factor for divers is that the influence of the wave decreases with depth until it completely disappears at a depth equal to half the wavelength. Beneath this limit of influence, the sea is calm. The facts that we have just examined are valid for the waves out at sea. But what happens near the shore? The particles near the seabed cannot make their circular movement, and their orbit becomes flattened until the oscillating movement is parallel to the seabed. This movement is known as surge. This action slows down the bottom of the wave, and the crests get closer and higher until they become unstable and break. This creates an area of surf in which the mass of water moves, sometimes violently, towards the coast, before the undertow takes it back out again to the sea. This surf zone is dangerous for divers and should be avoided. Currents. Other physical phenomena important to divers are sea currents. Diving in a current can be very tiring, causing the diver to consume much more air and making the dive less enjoyable. Let's now take a look at the different types of currents. Practically, a current is a river flowing in the water. Many currents can be foreseen, so diving can be avoided in them, or the dive can be planned accordingly. One type of current that is easy to foresee is when waves do not break parallel to the coastline. Part of the water moved by the surf is pushed along the shore, creating what is known as a longshore current. This means that if we enter and exit the water from the beach, these currents will transport us along the coast, so we should take into account that if we want to enter and exit from the same point, we will have to swim very hard. Alternately, we should choose a point of entry upstream of the exit point. In this case, remember that the easiest point of access should be chosen as the exit point. Then, when you have planned your dive route in favour of the current, you can then select an entry point upstream. There is another type of current that is often found in areas of surf. The water is pushed towards the coast, and then, in order to create an easy escape route to flow back out to sea, it digs insidious channels for the water to flow in. This creates what is known as a rip current. Don't try swimming against the current in the channel to return to the shore. By moving perpendicular to the current, you can get out of the channel to where the water is calmer. Luckily, the most insidious and dangerous currents for divers are also the least common. These are vertical currents that can drag the diver towards the surface, an upward current, or towards the seabed, a downward current. Generally, vertical currents occur when a current that is parallel to the surface encounters a steep wall that deviates the flow of water upward or downward. Also in this case, the best way to get out of such a current is to move perpendicular to the current and away from the wall. However, the strongest currents that divers are likely to encounter are those caused by the tides. Tides. Tides are a rising and falling of the level of the sea caused by the rotation of the gravitational system, the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun. The variations in level are much greater when the Earth, Moon, and Sun are aligned, or almost aligned. Therefore, the highest and lowest tides, spring tides, occur in the days of new and full moons. These variations in level have a predictable cycle, but they are subject to the influence of the conformation of the land masses. This is why you should always refer to local tide tables to find out the times and levels of the tides. It is the enormous movement of water that creates strong tidal currents and varies the level of the water. Therefore, the best time to dive is at slack water, which is the moment when the high or low tide has reached its maximum level and water movement is about to change direction. So, at slack water there is little or no current. Marine fauna. When you dive, you will encounter thousands of marvellous creatures, each one more beautiful or interesting than the other. Every dive you make will give you memories that you will never forget. You are guests in an environment that is home to giants, such as whales, and microscopic organisms, such as coral polyps. You will discover for yourselves that the creatures that are often depicted as fearsome and aggressive are not really that at all. The retiring and short-sighted moray eel moves its mouth not as a threat or in order to bite you, but only because this is its way of breathing. Barracuda are true predators, but they are predators of sardines or other small fish. You can even admire and observe sharks in their own environment without too great a risk. Obviously, there is a risk that you may be attacked, but this is much more likely to happen when you encounter very small sea creatures such as clownfish. In order to defend their home and young ones, these courageous fish even dare to challenge giants like humans. Most dangers are caused by divers behaving incorrectly. For example, if you think that hanging onto a stingray's tail might be fun, you should also consider that it has a very sharp barb at the tip of its tail. If you brush against or touch fire coral, you will immediately understand how it gets its name. In order to stun its prey, the electric ray can emit a high voltage electric shock that it also uses to defend itself, so don't try to pick it up. Some fish have poisonous spines to discourage predators from swallowing them. To avoid injury, always take care where you put your hands or feet and resist the temptation of touching everything you see under the water. Besides, by touching the animals you could destroy the delicate film they have that protects them from infections and parasites. To prevent contact that could be harmful to you or the underwater fauna, you should always wear a full-body suit, avoid touching any sea creatures, and read a good local naturalist guide to find out more about the marine life in the area you dive. As direct benefactors of the beauty of the underwater world, it is the task of us divers to ensure that this marvellous environment is passed on to the next generations in the same or better conditions. Boat diving. Some of the best dives that you will ever make will probably be from a boat. These dives will also be probably the most comfortable. Small rubber dinghies or rigid inflatable boats, RIBs, larger boats with a wheelhouse, or large cabin cruisers on which you can stay for many days are all used as dive boats. However, whatever type of boat you dive from, you must always follow the instructor or skipper's instructions. If you dive from a private boat, you should leave a detailed program of your plans with someone on land or at home. This should include not only your dive plan, but also your estimated time of arrival and details about the boat you are using. If you do not return at the expected time, the person on land should contact the emergency services. Therefore, if you are delayed for any reason, don't forget to let this person know. An important point to remember is that in many countries it is obligatory to leave someone on board who is capable of operating the boat. This person should also ensure that the anchorage is secure and be able to retrieve the anchor quickly to pick up any divers who have drifted away with the current. Underwater navigation. Just as boats manage to sail away and then return to where they came from, divers must also be able to follow a route underwater that will take them to and from where they want to go. Very often a guide will lead a group of divers on a beach, but each individual diver should be able to navigate a simple reciprocal course. The basic instrument used for navigating with a certain amount of precision is the underwater compass, similar to the type used on boats, but filled with liquid to withstand the increase of pressure at depth. There are compasses with indirect and direct readings. For the sake of brevity, we will only examine those with direct readings, which are the most common. There is a magnetized, rotating compass rose inside a transparent container. On the outside, there is a rotating bezel with 2 cursor points. A red line, called the lubber line, indicates the direction in which you wish to go. The compass should be worn on your wrist. By forming a right angle with the arm on which the compass is worn, the lubber line should be aligned with your entire body and, therefore, in the direction in which you want to go. Now you can navigate. The north point marked on the compass rose will always indicate the Earth's magnetic north. You can now rotate the bezel until the north reference point coincides with that of the compass rose. Now begin swimming. If you see that the north of the compass rose is no longer aligned with that of the bezel, you must swivel around until it is lined up again. In this way, you will travel in a straight line. To return from where you came from, you don't need to touch anything. Just turn round until the north point of the compass rose is aligned with the south point of the bezel. When you have found this position, you are ready to navigate the return leg. It's simple, isn't it? There are also other ways in which a compass can be used. By setting the compass to the direction of an object out of the water, you can then reach the object by swimming under the water. You will practice doing this on this course, but more complex routes are the topic of a specific dive that is part of the PSS Advanced Open Water Diver course. In the next module, you will discover the importance of organising a dive, examine the best way to plan a dive well, and learn how to solve some of the problems that may arise underwater. Until the next time.